All right, our speaker is Lisa Schultz. She is a senior recruiting consultant and corporate recruiter at AMD, Advanced Micro Devices, one of Austin's favorite companies. She has been recruiting since '97, starting in an agency environment for a couple of years and then working on the corporate side ever since. Her recruiting focus has been IT and engineering roles, but she also recruits for sales, marketing, supply chain, accounting, as well as other fields. So whatever your skill set is, she is going to have a conversation with you and be able to understand what you're talking about. So rare. She has recruited for a wide range of industries and companies, from startups to Fortune 500 companies such as Dell, Temple Inland, PayPal, Samsung, and AMD. She's been in the semiconductor world since 2010 at Samsung. For about 6 years, and then at AMD since 2017, where she currently focuses on both technical and non-technical roles. Lisa serves on the board of Austin Recruiter Network and volunteers her recruiting and coaching services for several organizations. She is passionate about helping companies attract and land key talent, as well as providing a great experience for candidates. So she cares about both sides of that interview desk. Let's give a very warm welcome to Lisa Schultz. Yay.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here. I don't get to do this that often. So, and I'm not technical, as I said, so please bear with me. And it's super crazy busy at AMD. We were doing so much recruiting. We can't even hire recruiters fast enough to fill all the positions. So that's great news, but it also means that I was a little bit rushed in getting this presentation prepared. So I kind of grabbed bits and pieces from other presentations that I've done. So just know it may be a little bit discombobulated, but hopefully it will all make sense. And I'm going to try to remember to pause at the end of each section so that you guys can ask questions about that section. And I will be referencing some information from a presentation from Dan Medlin, which you all may know. I'm pretty sure he's presented to you guys before. Dan has been in the recruiting business for many, many years. He has a book, Star Workbook, and it's got some really great advice on your job search, and you can get it on Amazon for like $12 or $13. So I'll reference that a few times. So anyway, this first slide is something that we did amongst the recruiting team at AMD recently. So I thought I would just share it. That's my dog, Louie. He's my sheepadoodle. And then my daughter is in the picture as well. So that's kind of just for fun. Let's see. Okay, there we go. I did it. Next slide. So we'll talk about probably the two most important tools that you'll use to land your next job: your resume and your social presence, specifically your LinkedIn profile. Then some tips on applying and getting the interview, and then interview prep, which is extremely important, and then the offer part. So when it comes to all the information I'm going to give you, honestly, there is not one specific right way to do a resume. There is, any one way to have a successful interview. There's a lot of different methods. There's a lot of different information out there. I say you should listen to everything, read everything, and then figure out what works best for you. You're going to hear some of the same overriding suggestions and techniques from probably every source you look at, and that's because there are certain things that you do want to pay attention to, regardless of which style works best for you. So when it comes to resumes, people always want to talk about, well, I always heard it was supposed to be one page. Is that true? So no, not necessarily. your resume, first and foremost, it's your calling card. It's what's going to get you hopefully to the interview stage. It needs to be professional. It needs to really sell you and your best experience. So keep in mind, recruiters and hiring managers have in most cases, you know, in my 20 plus years of recruiting, I have can't remember when I've been in a role where I wasn't super busy and had plenty of time to spend on going through resumes. Usually it's, you know, it could be 10 seconds per resume. And for the hiring manager, it could be the same situation. So it's important that you keep your resume succinct as possible. If you have less than, say, 5 years of experience, then yeah, one page is probably plenty to list the high points of your experience. It really comes down to what you've done in your most recent role or two. For those that have more than 5 or 10 years of experience, managers are most concerned with what you've been doing most recently, right? It kind of makes sense. And you've probably, your experience and your responsibility level, the scope of your roles has probably increased in level through the years, right? So a lot of people kind of lose sight of that, and they will devote the same amount of space on the page to all their positions going back many years. I would say avoid that. You really want to focus on what you've been doing in your past couple of roles. Depending on how many years you've been at each role. If you've been at one role 10 years, then obviously your resume is going to mostly be made up of what you've been doing in that past role. And I will be repeating a few things I'm noticing in my notes, but that's okay because it's important stuff. If you remember nothing else from what I'm telling you, highlighting and quantifying, and we'll talk about that later, your successes in your roles, including any improvements. That is what you want to make sure you include and point out in your resume. That is what is going to probably jump out at the recruiter and the hiring manager. And we will talk more about that. As far as cover letters, in technology, very few people use cover letters. In other industries, some managers may look for a cover letter, but it's really kind of gone by the wayside, to be honest. If you are not just applying online, if you are actually emailing your resume to an acquaintance within the company, a recruiter, or the hiring manager directly, then you definitely want to put something in the body of that email, but it needs to be very concise. So if you're sending me a resume, I want to know which position specifically are you applying to. That's really going to help me because I may or may not be working on that specific role. So you're going to make it much easier for me to get your information to the correct person if you can let me know the job number and the job title. That's going to be really, really helpful. But then in the body of the email, tell me exactly why you are a good fit for that role. Leave out any fluff, telling me how great you are, you're a hard worker, that kind of thing. That's not really helpful. What I really want to hear and see is what experience do you have specific to what the role is looking for. That's what is going to help get your resume seen. So here's an example So when it comes to your resume page and the layout, I like to maximize the real estate on my page. I will make my margins very narrow, and only leave maybe an inch at the top of the page. I only need one line, as you can see, to give you all the contact information that you're going to need for me. You need my email and my phone number to reach me. I'm giving you my LinkedIn profile URL, and then my city and state. You really do not need to list your full address. You'll probably look more savvy by leaving your full address off. In this day and age, people have gotten to where they don't want to share too much. And then a sentence, or it could even be a paragraph that is giving a good summary or a review of your experience. Again, try to leave any fluff out. If you have specific numbers where you want to quantify something, whether it's years of experience or number of certifications, maybe anything to do with dollars, like amount of money raised for the various fundraisers that you've been worked for example, something you can quantify that you really want to jump out, you could put that in the summary. And then I wanted to give you guys an idea of what I like to see as a recruiter regarding your various entries for the different jobs you've worked at. This is like one of my huge pet peeves, and I know it is kind of a pet peeve for a lot of hiring managers as well. Most candidates do not bother to add a blurb or a little bio on the companies they've worked for. So you have to assume that the person reading your resume may not have heard of any of the companies you've worked for. Believe it or not, you could have a junior recruiter looking at your resume, and maybe you've worked for, well, for example, at AMD. A lot of my friends who are not in technology, if I mention AMD, they're like, who's that? What do they do? So you've got to make it past the gatekeeper before you get to the hiring manager in most cases. So you want to make sure the recruiter has all the information they need, but the hiring manager as well is going to appreciate any information you can give on the companies that you've worked for. So it's not rocket science. I just go out there, I look at Wikipedia, for example, to kind of see, they usually give a really good succinct blurb on the companies. So I pull from that. You can add the logo in if you want. If your company is a large company, you may want to list the revenues. AMD is a Fortune 500. We do semiconductor design. That's what we do. We're a global company. And I listed, the number of employees, headquartered in Santa Clara. So that's just one example. Again, there are other ways to do this, but I definitely recommend putting in 1 or 2 lines about what your company does, even if it's a huge company. For example, if you've worked at Dell, okay, well, everybody knows what Dell is, but guess what? Dell is huge. So if I'm looking at your resume, I'm kind of curious to know, what division of Dell did you work for? And what was that division responsible for? Were you part of services? Were you part of, the product lines? So put that information in. I think that people that, even if they're familiar with Dell, like I could not tell you off the top of my head what the revenues are. So it's actually kind of fun trivia, if you will, to add some of that information in there. If you work for a small company, it's even more important for you to put a blurb in there. As a recruiter, when I'm looking at resumes, it's so irritating. I constantly have to open up a window and Google the name of the company to figure out what in the heck do they do. what do they produce, how big are they, whatever. So putting this in your resume is gonna make you look more professional, and the recruiters and the managers are gonna appreciate it. Back to what I was saying about quantifying your experience, I wanted to show you guys a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. I literally just went out on the internet last night and Googled business analyst resume example, just to give you guys an idea. So I'm not saying that I like the format of this, or, I didn't even really read through all the information they put here. But what I like is the middle section where they're telling us the measurable outcomes for what they did. So revenue growth, so they're listing percentages and they're listing dollars. So the more you can do that, that is really going to stand out. I recommend highlighting or bold, placing information like that in bold. I also very much recommend that you go through your resume and you bold any key terms that you want to jump out. Achievements, successes, applications, tools, whatever, make them bold. Also, you may want to customize that based on what role you're applying to. Let me know if that doesn't make sense, but that's one example. And here's another example. Just to give you guys an idea, resolved around 25 queries per week, serve 15,000 plus customers, train 250 plus people, generated sales of 30,000 product or $30,000 worth of products and services. So those are just examples I pulled off the internet. If you think hard enough, I'm sure that no matter what role you've been in, you've got some kind of quantifiable results. If you're a receptionist, you are managing X number of phone calls, or supporting X number of team members. You may have been involved with the phone system implementation and upgrade, which you can attach some numbers to, right? So regardless of your role, there should be quantifiable points that you can list on your resume. And one thing I wanted to mention at the beginning, but I kind of forgot, as you guys know, the Austin market is just booming right now. As I said, AMD is staying so busy, we can't even hire enough recruiters to keep up with the growth. And I pulled some information. You guys probably have read this or seen this, but it was from an April 13th article. Elon Musk mentioned that Austin is poised to be the biggest boom town in the US. The Wall Street Journal did a study on 53 of the US's metro areas with areas that have at least 1 million residents. They ranked Austin at number 2 in the country's top labor markets. And they based that on employment rate, wages, and changes in payroll and workforce size. The Greater Austin Chamber of Commerce said that in terms of growth from February of 2020 to February 2021, Austin ranks second among the top 50 US metro areas, behind Salt Lake City and Jacksonville, Florida. So the great news is obviously we're growing, and lots of jobs. A lot in the technology sectors, of course, but other areas as well. So that's the good news. The kind of bad news is that Austin continues to grow. We continue to see an influx of people. the more that this news gets out and the more that Austin is on TV and in the news and blah, 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 that just is bringing more and more people. So that leads to competition for jobs. So all the more reason why you've got to make sure that your resume stands out, make sure that you do some interview prep, and put your best foot forward. So I wanted to take a quick break. So I kind of went through the high points of what I feel like is important on the resume. We could do a whole 2-hour session just on resume. We don't have time for that. Does anybody have any questions that they want to ask right now specifically about resumes?
Lisa, I had a quick question. I put it in the chat, but you were talking about bolding the text on the resume. Does that help with the ATS, or is it just for the recruiter to see those key results better?
I have never heard that actually helps with the algorithms for searches. It's more a visual thing.
Gotcha.
It's all about a recruiter or a manager having literally maybe 10 seconds to look at a resume.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely important to have things in there listed in there that you want to show up in those algorithms, in those searches. But yeah, I don't think bolding it actually affects the algorithm as far as I know. So, okay. I don't have my chat window up because I'm on a little 15-inch screen here. So if you guys have a question, you'll have to just kind of yell out.
I have a question. This is Kathy.
Okay. Sure.
Excuse me. One of the things that we've recommended, or we've seen people recommend for a while, is to have an accomplishments section with 2 or 3 of your major accomplishments at the top, so that if somebody doesn't get to the bottom or get to page 2 or whatever, then that has been highlighted at the top half of the resume. Is that something that you like to see, if they put the name of the company where they had that accomplishment
Yeah.
in it, rather than having it all just listed chronologically? Or does it not matter?
I think that when I just think about it from the perspective of grabbing the resume, I normally am going to start kind of at the top and work down. So yeah, if there's a way that you have some really strong accomplishments that you can just stick, that are pretty condensed and stick at the top, absolutely, up in that summary. Yeah. And then you can repeat it down under that section in your resume, under that career section, and maybe add a little more detail, because that's what, managers are going to be interested in that. And one thing I didn't mention, I like to give the example of, for example, a salesperson. If you put on your resume, I am a top salesperson, I whatever, fluff, blah, blah, blah. I'm a great salesperson. So that doesn't really say anything. Nobody's really going to look at that. If you instead list out, I exceeded my quota, every quarter with the company by at least 10%, or I expanded the so-and-so market by X percentage, and, throwing in dollars and percentages, and you gave specifics, guess what? You don't have to tell anybody you're a good salesperson, right? If you have to tell somebody you're good at something, then that maybe you're not. So really, convey the message with hard numbers. So that kind of ties back to what you were saying. So if there's no more questions, we'll move on. So for LinkedIn, A professional headshot is good. And by professional, it really does not have to be done by a professional photographer. Nowadays, you can get great headshots with a cell phone camera, honestly. So do not feel like you need to go out and spend a lot of money on that, but make sure it is a flattering picture with good lighting. I'll show you some examples here in just a second. Make yourself findable. Companies advertise positions directly on their website, but many companies pay a lot of money and they advertise the positions on LinkedIn as well. When we post positions on LinkedIn, and I'm kind of digressing here, but you have the option, we can set the posting up to where you click through and apply directly on our website, or sometimes you have the option of just applying within LinkedIn. You just basically click a button saying apply to job. And all it's doing, it's sharing your profile with the recruiter. And all we have to go off of is what's in your profile. So it's important, again, that you have a good profile. And most people do not have they prefer not to have any contact info on their LinkedIn profile. I get that. I'm sure it could lead to spam and whatnot. I will tell you, it makes it really difficult for recruiters to find you when you've applied to the job and they look at your profile, and maybe the manager even looks at your profile and they're like, yeah, we want to talk to John Doe. And so then the recruiter sends you emails to say, hey, you applied to this role. We want to talk to you. If you're not checking your emails regularly, you may never see our message. It happens a lot. And then the recruiter has to, there's ways we can try to find you. We can try to find your contact info online with different tools. We don't usually have time for that, to be honest. So what you can do, if you do not want your regular email address put out there, create a separate email address just to use for your job search. And that doesn't mean you have to use that email address on your resume, but I really do recommend, if you are in a job search situation, put your email address or an email address on your LinkedIn profile and make sure you're checking that email. And another big thing, and this is a key takeaway, it's really simple, check your spam folders all the time. For some reason, it can't just be AMD email, but I cannot even tell you how many of my emails end up in candidates' spam folder. It happens all the time. And they miss emails from us saying, hey, we got your information, we want to talk to you. So check your spam folder, your junk folder. Once you reply to an email, it should automatically go to your focused inbox, but initial emails, and that happens with my candidates who have Hotmail, Gmail, Yahoo, every email almost I can think of, it ends up in their spam folder. So do check that. So again, make sure you are findable. Also in LinkedIn, there are settings to where you choose how often you get the in-mails. So some people have their set to where the in-mails do not get pushed out at all. They stay within LinkedIn, and in order to see those messages, you have to log into your LinkedIn profile. Or I think there's an option where they bundle the emails and they send them all to you once a week. If you're doing a job search, I would change your settings to where you are getting the emails sent to you real time. Go out there and research, just look up various people's LinkedIn profiles and see what you think looks good and what doesn't look good. Feel free to look up people who have done roles similar to yours. If you like some of the verbiage they have and it applies to you, then use it. You do not want to duplicate your entire resume, but you definitely want to put in the high. People put literally nothing in their LinkedIn other than the company they worked for and maybe the title. That's really not helpful. So I talked about the algorithms before. So companies are using key search words to find folks that are maybe not even actively looking. You need to make sure you've got those keywords listed somewhere in your profile so that you can get found. You have the option of attaching your resume to your LinkedIn profile. That's really helpful, I think. So you may want to go ahead and attach an updated resume. LinkedIn allows you to attach other documents as well. If you have any presentations or papers or things that you want to share, then that could be helpful to link that. When it comes to networking, you probably have already heard this before, link with anyone and everyone. You know, your friends, relatives, past and current coworkers and managers. The higher up the food chain, the better. Link with every recruiter you talk to. Some people only want to link with people that they actually have some type of relationship with. That's fine. As a recruiter, I'm kind of required to link with as many folks as I can. So I pretty much accept all the invitations that come to me. There are a lot of different things you can do in LinkedIn. I honestly don't have time to submit articles or to do a lot of following of companies. I mean, I follow companies on LinkedIn as far as clicking the button to follow them. I guess my point is, don't feel like you have to be a LinkedIn guru and spend all your time on LinkedIn and read every article. You know, check everything out that LinkedIn has to offer. Pick and choose what you want to actually take advantage of, but definitely take advantage of the things that we've discussed. As far as recommendations, they used to be kind of a big thing on LinkedIn, like everybody wanted to get recommended, right? Nowadays, it's great if you have recommendations from you know, people, hopefully the higher level, the better. That's awesome. But don't feel like it's going to hurt you if you don't have recommendations. It doesn't seem like recruiters don't have a lot of time to look at your recommendations. Managers might, and just know that managers will potentially be looking at your LinkedIn profile.
I have a question.
Yeah.
With the, attaching the current resume, well, when you apply to jobs, or at least I do, I tailor the resume, to kind of, I look at what the job requirements are and, what they say in the posting that the company has put out there. And then I tailor and change my resume accordingly. So, when I would apply, that would be the resume that I would send. But if I have one attached to LinkedIn as well, that would be the one that, I created when I first started looking for a job, and, that has the things that I, and sometimes some of those things are on the resume in the same way, but other times I've listed other things in the resume that I've tailored to a particular company.
Yeah. So tailoring the resume to the role is great if you've got time to do that. In your case, you may want to leave your resume off and just make sure that two things, that your profile itself has good, succinct information on each of the roles that you've had, and make sure your key keywords and any accomplishments are highlighted in there to be found in your profile, so that you can get to that next step of actually sharing your resume. And then the second thing, make sure you're checking your spam folder and make sure you're checking your LinkedIn inbox. So, but yeah, if you can customize your resume, a lot of people just don't have the time or take the time to do that, but that's always a great idea if you can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So just real quickly, I'm just showing you, I pulled this from a presentation I did years ago that was just on your LinkedIn profile and social presence. So these are just examples of not so great headshots. And then here's an example of some good headshots. You know, these are probably, well, I know the one in the top left is not a professional because I can tell from the lighting, but it's still a very good presentable headshot. Just want to quickly touch on, this is more information from the presentation I did on your social image. Companies can and do from time to time go online and Google your name and just make sure they'll make sure there's nothing crazy out there about you. So just know that anything that gets put online about you could be very hard for you to pull back in, sometimes impossible. Things that you can do to prevent that. In Facebook, for example, you can set your privacy settings so that nobody can tag you without permission. I think I have mine set to where when people who are not in my, they're not a direct connection, if you pull me up, it just shows my main photo on the front page and nothing else. And it's not that I even really have anything on my Facebook to be hidden, but I just want to keep it private and locked down and make it harder for folks that are actually trying to steal information, you know, make it harder for them to get to that. If there are some search results that you kind of would rather not be out there, there are some things you can do to try to get those results pushed down in the return list that comes up. And you can Google how to do that. And there is a website, or there was, called reputation.com. It's an online service that allows customers to monitor the web, delete personal information, and control how they look when searched online. I have not used that site, but again, that's reputation.com. You definitely want to make sure that your resume gets seen. We talked about, you know, applying on LinkedIn and on the website. A lot of candidates will do both. So for AMD, the way my postings are set up is you can just apply on LinkedIn if you want to. A lot of people will do it there, and then they'll also click through to the AMD website or go directly to the AMD website and apply to the same role there. For some recruiters, that's probably annoying to have both, but honestly, there are times where I miss somebody's application directly on our website because maybe there's 100 applicants and I just missed it. Or I may miss somebody applying on LinkedIn. So if you apply in both places, you actually are kind of increasing your odds of being seen. Search agents are really important. Creating a search agent is really easy. I won't go into it. You can look up how to do it online, but LinkedIn allows you to create search agents so that as positions are being posted that fit the parameters you're seeking, you're going to get notified. Most company websites, especially the larger companies, have that same feature built into their tool. So for AMD, you can create a search agent as well. I would take advantage of those. Getting in through your referrals is a great way to get in. So you may even, before you apply online, if you have a connection within that company, you might want to reach out to them first, because if they can refer you to the role through their employee referral process, then they could stand to get a bonus. If you have already put yourself into their system and applied, then oftentimes they will not be eligible for getting the bonus. So they might be more motivated to refer you if there's a bonus at stake. Many companies, many companies have this referral program. You know, it's their program is specific to the company. Some companies require that the employee actually have some type of relationship or know you before they refer you, but many companies do not have that stipulation. So even if you don't know anybody at the company, but you have a way to maybe reach out on LinkedIn or get through to somebody, then they may be more than happy to refer you, even if they didn't know you prior. So that's how we get a lot of our referrals at AMD. As far as finding contacts within the company that you may not already have contacts, try to find a commonality. Maybe you are a UT alum. You can look up on LinkedIn and find other UT alums at that company possibly, and maybe reach out and say, hey, you're a fellow UT alumni. Can you, I'm interested in this position, and I was wondering if you would be able to help me get my resume seen, blah, blah, blah. So you can always reach out directly to recruiters as well. They may or may not see your information, but when I post any jobs on LinkedIn and you pull up that job, I believe it shows you my name, that I'm the person who posted the role. So don't be afraid to reach out directly to the recruiter. The worst that's going to happen is they may not get back to you. So next is interview prep. So definitely do some research even before your initial call with the recruiter or the manager, whomever that is with. You don't need to memorize information, but just maybe take some notes. Make sure that you know and understand, what does the company do? What are their products or services? It's good kind of to know who their competitors are. You never know what's going to come up in your interviews, and maybe somebody mentions a name of a company and you don't recognize it, and come to find out it was a huge merger acquisition that happened with that company. And so it would just be good if you had done some research and knew what they were talking about. Know their competitors, look up their company mission and values. That may or may not come in handy. Kind of the company history. When were they formed and founded? Did they go through any, acquisitions? How big is the company? What are the revenues? Where are they headquartered? Where are they located? I like to look up press releases because it's usually got succinct, important information, and it's usually written at a kind of a layman's level that I can wrap my head around. Also looking at what people outside the company are saying. So you've got industry analysts that are constantly writing stuff about companies, depending on the size of the company. And then you could look at what the financial analysts are saying. For example, AMD is on a huge upswing. We are just doing phenomenally well. And there's a lot out there in the news about us. And so it kind of makes the candidate look good and savvy if they can, at least mention something about, oh yeah, I just saw that your stock just shot up to $120 yesterday, or something like that. Then Glassdoor and Indeed even now is offering reviews. Those are usually employee or ex-employee reviews. So always know that most of the reviews you see may be negative, because people tend to give negative more than taking the time to give positive, right? So take that with a grain of salt. Also know that you may be tempted to bring up something in an interview regarding something negative you saw on Glassdoor. And I would try to shy away from that, because even though you're not agreeing with the negative review, there's something about, the messenger, something about when somebody repeats something negative they heard about you, you're going to feel negative towards them, and it could really hurt you in the interview. However, if you've seen a lot of postings about maybe the company has horrible work-life balance, there's ways around that where you could, if you're trying to find out is the work-life balance going to be horrible in this particular role? You know, maybe at some point in the process you ask, you know, hey, I just want to know, what is the typical work week like? You know, how much remote work opportunity is there? Is there any after hours or on call? You know, try to flesh out the concern that you have without coming across as negative or being associated with that negative comment, if that makes sense. Those same sites often have interview tips that are submitted by the actual candidates. So it's kind of like cheating for the test, but oh my gosh, the more prepared you can be, the better. So definitely look for that. Make sure you have a good understanding of the job description. Read the job description. Know that some of the job descriptions are canned. You know, they're just, sometimes they're just super short and don't give you much info, and sometimes they're too long. So have a list of questions for the whoever you're interviewing with to kind of make sure you understand the expectation of the roles or the role. You're going to also be able to better sell yourself in your experience if you know specifically what the role entails. And you'll be able to provide examples that are customized to what they're looking for based on your experience. You know, I think you guys already know this, but looking up your interviewers on LinkedIn is really smart and can give you some insight. Getting insight from people you know that work or have worked there is also smart. Any questions about that? So moving on to, I just want to quickly touch on behavioral-based interviewing questions. It's very common nowadays, so you all are probably familiar with it, but basically, companies, more and more companies are encouraged by their recruiting team and HR team to use a behavioral interview style question. So an example of a behavioral based question, give me an example of a time when you had an important deadline and you missed it. That would be behavioral based. The hypothetical based, on the other hand, would be, what would you do if you had an important deadline and you were going to miss it? So the behavioral based question is a little more effective because it's asking you to actually give an example of something that happened to you. And experts say the best predictor of a candidate's future performance is their past performance in similar situations. So that is why we have the push for interviewers to ask in a behavioral format. So here's more examples. Describe a situation and blah, blah, blah. How did you handle blah, blah, blah? Tell me about a time when blah, blah, blah. And these slides are from a training that I did for managers on doing behavioral-based interviewing. So it's kind of written from that perspective.
By the way, Lisa, I have a question about something you mentioned earlier. This is Kathy again.
Sure.
So I had put in the chat when you mentioned reputation.com, I had put that in the chat just to remind people that you had mentioned it. And somebody said that they checked it out and it looks entirely oriented to the reputations of whole businesses, and said, do you know another website by chance to look up how somebody is portrayed on social media and as an individual, or should we just Google ourselves and see what it says, essentially?
I honestly do not, but that would be something that everybody should probably check into, not just Google yourself, but then Google tools in tools for I would start with tools for fixing your online social presence and just see what comes up. There probably are companies. I would definitely check out those companies before I gave them my money to do anything, because they could be a sham. But yeah, I guess I had never looked at the reputations.com site, so sorry that's not helpful. But I bet there are sites out there that could help. And there's lots of free information out there that I found on how to get your negative results pushed down in the list of search results when your name comes up.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure. So for interview prep, so it's important that your communication strategy have clearly defined key accomplishments. So Dan Medlin calls these your STAR stories. And the idea of the STAR method of relaying something is not something, it's not something he came up with. It's been around forever. I think he kind of customized an acronym. But it's basically the idea that whether you are in an interview or you're in an elevator pitching something to somebody or just talking to somebody, when you are presenting the story, you need to have kind of thought it through. You need to present the situation. The issue was, or the project was, I had to implement an employee referral process for the company. So that was the task. I was the only person, on this project, and I did delegate some of the work to others. You would want to tell what your responsibility was for the project. The more specifics you can give, the better. I had to implement this project within 6 months. I had, maybe you had a budget for the project. So, I had $50,000 to make this happen or whatever. My stakeholders in the project were the director and the manager and blah, blah, blah. So give the situation, and then any challenges or issues that came up, you'll be mentioning. You will talk about your actions. What did you do to come to the solution or get results? So I held focus groups with employees and focus groups with managers to get their input on the current employee referral process, find out what they liked and what they didn't like. And then from there, I came up with a new updated employee referral process, which I presented to the manager and the director, and they approved it, and it was implemented within 3 months, and our employee referral rate went up by 20% from 50 referrals a month, to 75. And we ultimately, our higher rate went from this percentage to this percentage of hiring folks that came from referrals, something along those lines. So you're giving the actions and you're giving the results. And of course, the results are probably one of the most important parts. And be able to speak to that project, because the manager, the interviewer is probably going to want to know, well, tell me exactly how you did this part of the process. Were you responsible for that, or was somebody helping you? So you had an issue or a challenge with this. What do you feel like you could have done differently, or what do you think you could have done differently to get even better results? So be prepared to speak to that. And I strongly recommend that you actually sit down before any interview, or before you even start your job search process. Write down some of these star responses to just some of the projects that you've been responsible for. Practice speaking it out loud. If you can get somebody to play interviewer and probe you, that's even better. I promise you that hearing yourself speak you will refine your story, and will become better and better. And if you come up with multiple different stories, when you get into an actual interview, you may not be asked the exact same question, but I promise you, you're going to be able to pull bits and pieces from your various stories to pull in to your answer to their question. The next slide, I know we're running out of time. This is just a good example of some behavioral questions that you should be prepared to ask. These are good examples where you could sit down, write out your story, practice your story. You'll be way more prepared for your interview. I'm going to zip through this because you guys will have access to these slides. For the interview itself, make sure you've got a good handshake, use direct eye contact, make sure you're friendly and you smile, even if you're nervous, just, come across friendly. Do not be afraid to pause to gather your thoughts. Don't be afraid to ask the interviewer to repeat or rephrase. If you don't have an answer or you don't have the experience, the worst thing you can do is ramble on or try to bluff or cover up. They will actually respect you for saying, you know what, I actually am not familiar with that. Or, I have heard of that, but I have never used it. Just to be honest. They are not necessarily looking for somebody who has that experience. They want someone who has the foundation and the capability to ramp up and learn, most likely. Make sure you do have some good questions prepared or in your head to ask at some point during the interview. And then, of course, thank and express interest when you finish the interview. When it comes to offers, do your research. You can find a lot of information online about what salaries companies are offering. Take it with a grain of salt, because when you look at some of those websites with salaries, you could look up AMD for a software engineer position, and you're going to get maybe a median or average salary. Keep in mind, they're pulling information from candidates that work in the Bay Area and Austin and Colorado and Florida and Massachusetts, right? So the Bay Area is going to be skewing numbers. So you just need to kind of keep that in mind. Make sure that if you want to follow up with a thank you email, keep it very succinct and specifically tell the manager how your experience can address their needs, their pain points. More on offers, you really kind of have to go by gut feel, but don't be pressured to tell them what you're currently making. You don't have to tell them that. You don't have to tell them what salary you're seeking. You can politely say, I really like to learn more about the role before we talk about that. Be sure and consider the entire package when you're comparing. Can be a big difference. There's more than just base salary. So put pen to paper, ask them to send you the benefits information. So I send out the open enrollment document, which is what we use at the end of the year for folks to sign up for insurance for the next year, because it goes into great detail on all the benefits. And when you add everything up that we're giving in addition to base salary, it's a really great package. So make sure that you are trying to compare apples to apples when you're dealing with multiple offers or comparing to what you're currently making. Don't be afraid to negotiate. I've never pulled back an offer because somebody politely wanted to negotiate. That's just ridiculous. Companies often expect you to push back. As long as you're polite about it, the worst they can do is say, you know what, this is the final offer, we can't do anymore. An offer is usually not really final. If they want you, they can get creative. Besides base salary, there could be sign-on, there could be equity stock. And sometimes you can leverage and get maybe more vacation days depending on the company. So don't be afraid to negotiate. Once you land a position, sadly, it takes quite a while to climb in your salary. Average increases are with most companies, around 3.5% to 4.5% per year, right? So it can take you a number of years to get to where you might have come in at if you had just negotiated for what you felt you were really worth. So did I get to the end? Oh my gosh, that was it. Okay, it's 11:40. Do you guys have any questions about the offers or interview prep or anything else?
Lisa, I have a question for you about the when a company is sending you additional information, you've filled out the online application, sent your resume in, and then they are asking for additional information for, let's say, your salary for the past 3 years. How do you handle something like that? Because you have to fill it out. And it happens to be a company that I've already worked with, so they have access to my salary, but just kind of as a general practice, right? It could have been a different company that I was applying for, and they were asking that same information. Sometimes your only ability is to put in a dollar amount. So I didn't know what you thought about that.
Yeah, and sometimes it can help you, right? If you've had good competitive salaries, it can help you sometimes to share it. If you don't think it's going to help you, I would first contact the recruiter or the HR person and just say, I wasn't really comfortable sharing that information. Is it required? Many times they'll probably say, no, you can just leave it off. That would be my starting point to see if it's actually required. Some companies, I know the company I was at before AMD, we would actually require, we would say we were required the paycheck stub to be shown to us. And we made it seem like it was really required, but honestly, if the person really pushed back, we would let it go. So if it comes down to, they're like, we're not going to move forward in the process unless you share that information, then I say you may as well share it. You probably have nothing to lose. But if you don't want to share it, then just push back on HR or the recruiter and see if you can forego that. I don't really know why they necessarily need to have that information.
Okay, great. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, every company's different, and I will tell you at AMD that we as a company are not asking people what they are making in their current role. And we're doing that because in California, they passed a law a couple years ago that for companies in California, you cannot ask candidates what they're currently making. And I think they have that law in Massachusetts. So we decided as a company nationwide, or maybe even worldwide, I'm not sure, we are not asking that of candidates. We will ask what they want to make, but not what they've been making. So if we're dealing with a company based in California, they could be going against California law. But anyway, any more questions?
There are a few, this is Kathy, there are a few related questions that are in the chat. One says, could you refuse to tell what your past salary was and cite the non-disclosure agreement that you had to sign with your current company that you're not supposed to ever talk about your salary?
That is a really good, I don't know if I've never heard of a company doing that, but it sounds really good to me. And I would, because if I'm a recruiter and you tell me that, the last thing I want to do is have you break your NDA or anything with your past company. So that actually is really smart. I say go for it.